Mercy is the new action thriller starring Chris Pratt and Rebecca Ferguson. It's set in a near future where there's a system set in place that deals with likely guilty criminals called the Mercy Program, where an advanced AI judge gives the person on trial 90 minutes to prove their innocence, otherwise they will be executed. In this movie, we follow Detective Chris Raven, played by Chris Pratt, a previous supporter of the Mercy Program who wakes up trapped in a chair on trial for the murder of his own wife. He must prove his innocence or die. This movie's been under a lot of fire online, so I decided to go out and see it myself and give my honest thoughts on if it's really that bad. Before we get into all that, as always, this review will contain spoilers, and if you have not seen the movie and wish to not be spoiled, now is the time to either click off or skip to the non-spoiler thoughts at the end. Alright, I'll just get it out of the way right here and now. I do not support the use of generative AI in really any way. I think that it is extremely harmful to the environment, and with continued use of it, we will start to really see the effects of it in the coming years. And it also is very harmful to art, whether that is your drawings, your digital art, your music, or I guess in a more relevant scenario here, movies. And now, with that in mind, the main reason this movie is under fire is because of the topic of artificial intelligence. A lot of people are claiming that this movie is pro-AI and propaganda, and I just want to first and foremost clear the air on that. I personally do not believe this movie is pro-AI. However, I wouldn't say the message is like exclusively anti-AI either. Basically, the way AI is presented in this movie is majority negative, where there are one or two scenes that do present it in a more positive light, which I wasn't a fan of, but I do think one or two scenes out of an hour 40 movie that is generally anti-AI just doesn't deserve to completely flip it and make it be perceived as pro-AI. I mean, throughout this movie, numerous times it shows the negatives and shortcomings of artificial intelligence and why it is fundamentally bad in a lot of ways. There's a moment in the movie where the AI judge, played by Rebecca Ferguson, is arguing with Chris about acting upon gut feelings and emotions rather than facts, and the AI doesn't understand that the gray area in between the facts is where the answer is. An innocent homeless man is killed by AI in this, as well as it almost kills a cop. And the entire point at the end of it is that AI is flawed, and human instinct and feelings is what solved the case ultimately. There's a good amount of problems with this movie, but I also do think that there's some positives to go over first. To start, Chris Pratt gives a pretty solid performance as Chris Raven. It's not his best acting performance he's ever given, but it is by no means bad. He plays a morally gray husband who, after the loss of his work partner, he falls back into alcoholism, leading to him becoming an asshole to his wife and his daughter and not being there for them when they need it. The plot of the movie centers around Chris's failing, where the mystery is spread through all of his problems over the last year. A suspect that he discovers is a man that Chris's wife has been secretly cheating on him with, and he finds his daughter's secret Instagram account where she's able to express her true feelings, which gives him another lead. It was a compelling narrative that led to a solid enough mystery that was enjoyable to watch all throughout. The big center point of this movie being about human emotions and feelings was a good theme that I think a lot of people overlook in this whole AI discussion. I would also say for the most part that this is a pretty solid movie visually. It doesn't have like that much going for it, but it doesn't look bad. And outside of those really tacky flying police vehicles that feel like they're just there to make you think, ooh, this is what the future looks like, I think the movie looks pretty good. A lot of people suspected that this would look very similar to last year's War of the Worlds, and I can definitely say that it is nowhere near that level of trash. It looks and feels pretty high budget, which I would hope for with the $60 million budget for this movie. So yeah, there are some good things about this movie, but there's also a lot of negatives to be had with it. The major negative for me is that outside of Chris Raven, every character just kind of falls flat and feels very one-dimensional. The movie is really just centered around Chris's character and his emotions, and pretty much all we got for character depth and motivations outside of him are just how he makes other people feel. It's just ridiculous to me that you would get Rebecca Ferguson here to play a lifeless, uninteresting AI. Matter of fact, why is Chris Pratt here either? I don't think anyone involved with the production of this movie truly expected a smash hit out of it. It's just another example in the movie industry of money being thrown at a wall and hoping for the best. I think the movie is pretty well paced throughout, but the end does really start to drag in my opinion. There's just this chase scene that feels like it's never gonna end, and when it does, it leads to another sequence added on that I just didn't really care about. I talked about earlier how they kind of drive home this theme at the end of this movie of how AI is flawed and how it relies on human instinct to solve this case. However, there is one final interaction between Chris and the AI judge, which I think just kind of boiled down to weird writing, where I don't think it was like intended to sound pro AI, but it kind of came off that way. And I don't remember line for line what it was, but it was something along the lines of like, humans and AI both make mistakes, which I just thought was kind of a weird narrative to go with. However, I don't think that that was really the point it was trying to make across the entire movie. I'd say for a majority of the movie outside of that, it felt like what I was saying beforehand. I found the reveal of the true murderer of Chris's wife to not necessarily be predictable, but once you think about it, it kind of is. It's that typical trope of the unsuspecting nice guy who's helpful to the protagonist while actually being the mastermind behind it all. However, I do think his motives were actually interesting and fascinated me quite a bit. They tied into that theme of true human feelings and experiences in a compelling way that I liked. So overall, is the hate for Mercy justified? Not quite. It's by no means great, and it's barely a good movie, but it's also definitely not a 20% on Rotten Tomatoes level of bad. It's just a fine, average movie. The conversation about it being pro-AI is kind of ridiculous to me, and is almost directly a complete opposite to the general point of it, being that AI is flawed and human instinct and feelings is what should be trusted. I think if this one were straight to streaming, I could even recommend it for that. It's solid enough where you can kick back with some popcorn at home and have a decent time. As for seeing it in theaters though, plugging in my score for Mercy, I'm giving it a 5.9 out of 10. I think it's just a perfectly alright film. It has some solid messaging, and Chris Pratt gives a solid performance. However, I think it does really underutilize the rest of the cast and doesn't really flesh them out all that interestingly, with a kind of semi-predictable twist to it. I'm gonna leave it at that. Here's where I want to hear your thoughts on the movie. Did you love it? Hate it? Fall somewhere in between? And I'll see you guys in the next one.